Welcome to Celebrating Act 2. Celebrating Act 2 is the user manual for the second half of your life.
Welcome back to Celebrating Act 2. I'm here with my partner, John Coleman, and a very special guest, a regular contributor, Manny Pacheco.
Always happy to be here. Thank you.
Hey, Manny, not too long ago, we were doing a video with you, and the subject was Kirk Douglas. And you brought up a very important point that his son, Michael Douglas, has become a famous star, followed in his father's footsteps, a significant producer as well, like his father. And at that point, I thought to myself, you know, the film business is rather incestuous. There have been lots of famous stars whose parents were famous stars. And I wondered, is it always been that way, or is that a recent phenomenon?
Absolutely. In fact, it goes back to the silent era. One of the biggest stars of all time, Lon Chaney, was as big as it gets. He did everything he could to keep his son out of show business, but it was not to be. His son caught the bug, playing heavies as Creighton Chaney, his given name, in the early 1930s, and only changing as a tribute to his father when he started doing more serious monster and villainous movies in topical cinema, such as Of Mice and Men, when he played Lenny, and of course as the Wolfman. So yes, there's one great example. I'll give you another one from the silent era. Charlie Chaplin. His daughter Geraldine Chaplin, of course, made a mark for herself. So there's two great examples. Douglas Fairbanks Sr. was married to Mary Pickford. They had a son, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., and he was making movies well into the 1980s. So, in fact, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. may not have had as big a career as his father, but he had a longer career. So those are some really great examples of the silent era. When we get into talkies, of course, where you'd find a lot of the folks would end up with children working. John Huston, of course, the great director, always liked to employ his father. His father, of course, was already an established star, Walter Huston, right? Yeah. And as a matter of fact, after Walter died, John Huston started making appearances in films. Notably, his great role was in the movie Chinatown. So John, a great director, but then ended up on camera, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, and John Huston's children became significant stars. Danny Huston, I see Danny Huston in a lot of movies. I love him. And Angelica Huston.
Yeah, and she won an Oscar for Preeti's Honor.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. So they're all Oscar winners, by the way. Walter won for, of course, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. John won a number of directorial Oscars, and of course, Angelica Huston. John Barrymore, of course, John Barrymore was big in the silent era as well as talkies. His son, John Drew Barrymore, attempted acting, not very good, and he lived a tragic life. But Drew Barrymore, his granddaughter, has done quite well for herself as an iconic star, and some would argue just as big as the career John Barrymore had. So,
also some lesser people that we've spoken about recently, like Tex Ritter. While he didn't move into movies, John Ritter was a big star on television, and there are probably a raft of those kinds of examples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like one name for television is, although he started in movies, is Martin Sheen.
Of course.
He's got his two sons, Charlie Sheen, who's got a fabulous television career, and Emilio Estevez.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we couldn't have this conversation without mentioning Judy Garland, who was married to Vincent Minnelli. They had, of course, a great child star who became a terrific actress. Liza Minnelli. Liza Minnelli, of course, won an Oscar for Cabaret. Again, just like a number of actors, including Kirk Douglas, the child wins the Oscar. Well, the parent is wanting for one. They have missed the accolade.
Yeah, there's a lot of current actors and actresses who fit this category of having a famous parent star, but their name is different, and the name that comes to mind is Gwyneth Paltrow.
Hmm.
Hmm.
She's the daughter of Blythe Danner, and of
Right,
course her father Bruce Paltrow is or was a cinematographer, I think,
right.
director cinematographer. So she's got a different name, and we don't always make that connection to Blythe Danner unless you're reading People magazine.
Well,
Although,
Goldie Hawn, the same thing.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
her daughter, Goldie Hawn and Kate Hudson. That's a good
Yes.
example.
But
Yeah.
one that actually has the same name, one of my favorites, is Laura Dern, who I've been
Yes.
following her for years, and her dad still amazing, and
Yeah.
she is
Oh,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, he did not win an Oscar. She just did.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that tradition goes on. We also can't forget Henry Fonda. That's Hollywood royalty right there. Henry Fonda
Oh
was
boy.
son Peter and Jane. So there's three
And
stars.
let's not forget Peter Fonda. I love Peter Fonda. I thought he didn't. I don't think he had a big body of work, but he was very good. And
He ended up in iconic work like
Right.
Easy Rider. I mean,
yeah,
Was that the
you
Roger Corman?
yeah. Was that?
That was he did that with Roger Corman, right? And Ron
Yeah.
Howard directed it or something. One of those kind
No,
of
not.
combinations.
Oh no. Dennis Hopper directed it.
Dennis Hopper, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's right. Yeah, oh yeah. And the Redgraves, if you want to go across the pond. Yeah,
Of
John
course.
Cade and Vanessa and Lynn Redgrave.
Yeah.
Daughters Jolie Richardson, Natasha Richardson. Yeah, then talk about Hollywood royalty. Right there, there's Hollywood royalty. So
Yeah. Let's end with one of my favorites, Debbie Reynolds. Debbie
oh,
Reynolds not only had Carrie, Carrie Fisher, her daughter, who became the iconic Princess Leia, but in the last episode that I saw of the Star Wars trilogy or Nana trilogy, whatever it is now, 9, 10 films, um, they brought Debbie Reynolds back for an icon. I don't know how they did it for a quick scene.
and I think
And
of Carrie Fisher. You mean?
Carrie Fisher, thank you.
Yeah, they
And
brought back Carrie
she appeared with her daughter, whose name is, I got to look it up, Billy Lord.
Fisher.
And I believe Carrie Fisher had already passed away by the time they made this movie. So I don't
Right,
know what magic they did to bring her back, but she appeared in a scene with her daughter,
and of
Debbie
course,
Debbie Reynolds' granddaughter.
and let me mention a couple of things about that. Carrie Fisher writing, of course, a diary or memoir about the relationship between Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher, Postcards from the Edge. Meryl
Yeah,
Streep got to play the part of Debbie. And, don't ever discount how close these families are. Debbie Reynolds completely stricken after the passing of Carrie Fisher. She dies 72 hours later
uh,
because she just couldn't fathom the loss of her child.
yeah,
So that was an amazing 72 hours or so where Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds was the talk of the town. And together they rest in heaven. So yeah, absolutely, that's a good way to carry this particular conversation out.
yeah. And I like the title Hollywood royalty that you've given them. They are kind of Hollywood royalty. We look up to them, don't we?
Yes, we do. And when they actually take a walk on that passing parade, they have that Hollywood royalty wave.
Yeah.
Okay. So just before we leave our audience today, could you remind everybody who would love to see some other stories that you've written over the years, where they can find them?
Well, that particular series of stories can be found on my Forgotten Hollywood blog. I happen to write two blogs back to back on the passing of Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds when it happened. As it was happening, I wrote it in real time, and you can find that at ForgottenHollywood.com. Those two stories will end up in a book that I'm writing with my sister, Forgotten Hollywood: Beware of the Blog, because those stories are just too important not to mention and remember in print. And of course, if you'd like to find my Forgotten Hollywood book series, you can find them on Amazon.
Thank you.
Good. Manny, thank you again for sharing and helping us celebrate your act too.
And I just want to remind people, if they go to YouTube and they type in Celebrating Act Two, just that we are a named site now. They can binge watch Manny. I have a playlist for you, so if you don't get enough of Manny and you want Manny video all the time, you got it right there.
And may I add, a little bit of Manny goes a long way.
It is. That is so true. And we'll look forward to having you back. John, any last words?
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
For more on Celebrating Act Two, visit our webpage, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and tell your friends. Celebrating Act Two is the user manual for the second half of your life.